the time has now come for us all to do more. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home. Because the critical thing we must do to stop the disease spreading between
So, Arik, how's your year been?
So, Annie, how's your year been?
How has your year been
How's
for
your
you?
year been?
Well, unprecedented.
I must say it's been a really mixed batch.
I think.
So my year has been incredibly exciting.
I was going to say interesting, but that's such a cliche. Like,
It's a big question.
It's been a roller coaster.
Good question. Where to start?
interesting. I'm sure like lots of people will say interesting.
I mean, it's been pretty chaotic.
Pretty disrupted, I'd say.
It's been way harder. It's only second year.
It's been a very unique year, to put it lightly. I think this year's been quite
Working all right.
Actually, it's kind of funny.
I mean, it's been interesting.
How's my year been?
Well, I think it's definitely getting better now.
My year has, I think, been one of the difficult years.
But yeah,
Like, it's been quite cathartic sort of talking about everything really.
A ninth person has tested positive for coronavirus in the UK. The woman flew into London from China and was tested after developing symptoms.
I felt a slight, bubbling under the surface panic. Not because the parties have been cancelled, but oh my goodness, this thing is coming to us. This thing that's spreading around the world is actually coming to us. And what is going to happen?
The University of Cambridge dragged its feet in telling students definitively that it was going to be shutting down for the Easter term in March. And people in the university knew up to 2 weeks before they officially told everybody that everybody would have to leave.
The government yesterday declared that it expects to take further and faster measures in the coming days. In light of these latest government announcements, the university has today moved into its red phase in response to the coronavirus pandemic. We are asking students, both undergraduate and postgraduate, to return home now, if possible.
For international students, those days, those weeks, for many of people were the difference between getting home and not getting home, with the difference between tens of thousands of pounds worth of tickets, with the difference between quarantining, with the difference between being isolated in university accommodation for months.
Confess is like Cambridge's anonymous confessions page. Essentially, people can submit pretty much anything they want. It goes through a portal which anonymizes it essentially, and then we see sort of a list of everything that's submitted, and you sort of let some through to the page, don't let others through. And in that sense, it's just quite a nice sort of community almost, where people can see what other Cambridge students are thinking or what they're doing, and it does just foster a nice sense of togetherness.
My college is sending me home to my abusive family. Makes me wonder what they'll consider an appropriate reason not to be able to go home in the summer. Like, fuck you. Fuck you all the way to hell and back. The university has totally failed to give out a unified message on what students should be doing. Colleges are not being clear about whether or when students need to return home. The lack of information about next term going ahead and exam dates is appalling. If I'm stressed as a non-finalist home student, then I can't imagine the pressure that people in other positions are under right now.
On Friday the 13th of March 2020, we got an email from Trinity College, Cambridge, saying that college will try to have as few people in college as possible. And if you can, please leave by Monday. So we got the email on Friday afternoonish. And so I live in Kenya usually, and Kenya closed its borders Saturday morning to non-residents. And given I am now resident in the UK, I would visit my family on a visitor visa to Kenya, and hence I couldn't do that, which was quite devastating. And I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? But one of my friends, bless her soul, and I got a message from her straight after Trinity's email saying, hey, my family have said you can come live with us if you want to. Even though I knew I had somewhere to stay, I think I struggled a lot with, I am basically homeless in the UK. It's just that feeling of, oh my God, if someone decides they do not want me here, I will have nowhere to stay. And that was just scary.
There's two ways of taking the whole lockdown situation and two kinds of personalities in that regard. People who take it very positively and they're very proactive. They do sport at home, they shower every day, and they wear these beautiful outfits throughout the house all day, and they find time to be productive. And then there's my kind of person that even though I am very positive and I'm very optimistic about things, I can't help but being at the same time quite sad and teared apart on the inside because of all the situation.
So both my parents were like quite high risk, being extremely grateful for not getting stuck at uni. But at the same time, having the three of us all at home all the time was quite constricting. Just don't think the university really realised. I think they thought people will have noise in their house, or they'll have distractions, but they won't necessarily have sort of an increased responsibilities or just increased emotional burden of these things, because distractions don't just exist as a distraction. It's something that plays on your mind all the time. I don't know how I would have spoken to anyone at the university about how something like that can actually affect someone. I think they would have just said, if you're worried about money, you can apply for hardship. Without realizing that these things were so connected to just anxiety and uncertainty and stuff.
The first part of from probably March to September was really quite blissful. I looked after myself better. I wasn't worried about exams for the first time in my life. I discovered a lot about myself, what I really wanted. I went in nature more. I baked. I was living my best life. The things I didn't really do in sixth form because I was working towards exams that I didn't really want to do.
So A-levels being cancelled, I was initially really, really angry, to be honest, just because, and that sounds really strange, I know, oh, no exams, bugger. But it's just, I had no clue what the hell was going to happen. And having that stop, it threw every single sort of idea which I had about what was going to happen up in the air. And just having to wait for probably what was about 5 months, I think, something like that, until the announcement from Gavin Williamson came out about the whole algorithm and things. It was just a pain, and the most you had was maybe a Zoom call once a week to make up for any missed lessons or missed content or whatever. You just spend your days sitting there, effectively on ice, waiting for anything to happen. And then in August, it just all happened at once.
Hundreds of thousands of students in England and Wales and Northern Ireland have received their A-level and vocational qualification results today after major disruption caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The cancellation of exams due to lockdown meant schools and colleges were asked to estimate grades, which were then moderated by exam boards to ensure the results were not significantly higher or lower than in previous years. But there's controversy because the figures for England show that 39% of grades were marked down, while 2% went up.
the A-level students all knew that their exams had been cancelled. So everyone was, pretty happy. We were all in kind of, we came into school in our old uniform, and we were kind of having like a party on the last day. And then they took the very small group of IB students, there were sort of 20 of us to sort of 80 A-level students. They took us into a room and sort of said, we have absolutely no idea what's happening, so you're going to be revising as per normal. In the end, exams were cancelled. We ended up getting our results July. So I think they released details of why you got certain grades, and we saw that it wasn't the coursework. So we knew that it was because of past attainment at the school. So because someone didn't do great on their exams, it meant that I wouldn't be going to the university I wanted to go to, which obviously was very hard to be based on an incredibly small cohort to try and do statistics based on that.
This is the first time in history of IB that we see such substantial differences between the predicted grades and the final grades on a large scale, considering that the IB examiners had no real grounds to evaluate and assign us our grades other than marking our coursework. How is that a fair way to assign IB graduates their final grades, considering the current circumstances they are living in? How is that fair on the students that have worked for 2 years plus to get into the universities they want to study their passions in?
I remember sending emails to my director of studies, which they have since brought up, where I was saying, please don't let everything I've been working for years be in vain.
As a student myself, I want justice for my fellow students around the world. This is unreasonable coming from the IB, which is notorious for preaching educational equality and justice.
A moment of silence for all those Cambridge offer holders who have been rejected/disenfranchised as a result of criminal mismanagement at the highest levels of the government. We need to hold our university to account that offer holders, especially from underprivileged backgrounds, won't be unfairly disadvantaged as a result of this.
It was really horrible for my mental health. I mean, I had to increase the antidepressants I was on. It felt like I had absolutely no power to control my future.
I did feel not doing my exams and not having been to school for a full 6 months, no thought of sort of deeply academic things for a long time, had sort of switched my brain off to the point that it was like nothing and then full speed ahead. Like, I didn't feel prepared for university. Academically, I didn't get to have the kind of decompression that like a summer with your friends might give you before going into sort of a more difficult experience such as university, perhaps particularly somewhere like Cambridge. I didn't feel ready at all.
We had a meal where we sat down with kind of senior members of staff. They asked where we lived. We were in fourth year accommodation. It was a bit of a mess. And they asked, oh, why are you there? And I said, well, we were the kind of people who, it was a bit of a mess with us getting in. And I was like, I actually got rejected. They said, no, you weren't. You weren't rejected. And I remember being so frustrated to have them try and erase months of uncertainty and frustration and upset and anxiety and depression to just say, oh no, it didn't happen. And to try and sort of sweep that under the rug. I found that incredibly hard.
A leaked email seen by Varsity outlined plans for all lectures in the 2020-21 academic year to be conducted virtually.
We are forced to come back, and most of us were doing remote degrees. I just can't see a world where this is sensible. We're just faced with a wall. We had meetings with the Vice Chancellor for Education. And he basically said that Cambridge will be safe, there will be no second lockdown. And I said that I want you to go on record with this, that you say you promise there will not be a second lockdown and we will not be stuck in a foreign country. And he didn't really want to do it.
Someone basically said, oh yeah, like at least in my college, Christ's, they had 4 contingency plans for how to deal with COVID of increasing, varying based on the viral numbers, but then also the restrictions. And they said, yeah, we started out with ultimately in September, kind of the red alert worst of the 4 plans that involved the most restrictions. And I was like, uh-oh, that really wasn't what was being expressed to us via emails. It was much more optimistic, much more positive.
I believe we were the first staircase to go into isolation in Old House, so the college had no idea what to do. We didn't have our bins taken out for about 10 days. There was no real way for us to get food. You can't go and do your shopping, and they're not delivering you the whole food which they expect you to eat normally. It was utter hell. I was having to beg people I knew from Zoom calls to try and bring me food, and just having this stench of whole food rubbish building up. There was like bin bags and bin bags on bin bags full of muck just sitting in the kitchen behind me. I mean, those first 10 days were utter hell just to deal with, especially when I was only about 2 or 3 weeks in and, you know, been locked up and I can't do anything about it, and I've got literal piles of rubbish building up around where I'm living. You know, it's not sort of glamorous experience you expect a fresh's first term to be.
At all stages, college has been above and beyond the law in terms of how strict restrictions are. And there was a stage in Michaelmas where we were having porters just kind of burst into our houses and do random spot checks and into our rooms and things like that, which I found really stressful. I was getting to the point where I was like having dreams about, in my dream I had someone over and I got caught and things like that, and you just think like, gosh, is it really affecting my subconscious to that extent?
Having to self-isolate? Fine. Being jolted out of a peaceful evening study by porters banging on your door, yelling that your self-isolation begins now and subjecting you to a commentary on how people die all the time, COVID is here forever, and you wish students weren't here? Not fine. Okay, Cambridge, we need to talk. My college has been invaded by Trinity porters recently, and we need to urgently address how much they resemble dementors. They suck the life and joy out of existence. # get off the hill. Wouldn't have batted an eyelid if we just had a simple phone call telling us we had to self-isolate, but I'm literally about to cry from that experience. Please, porters, think about how your actions make us feel. Sincerely, a student whose anxiety levels went through the roof when you pounded on the door at 10 p.m. at night.
Porters are supposed to make you feel safe, but I think they've had the opposite effect this year. There's not a time in college where you're not anxious. Even if there's someone from your household in your room, the threat of porters, like everyone's just so anxious and on edge. You can't fully enjoy yourself. You can't relax anywhere. And with Trinity and mental health, like they don't have a good track record this year at all. We've lost 2 students in 2 terms and they're still not changing anything. They're being stricter with COVID than they were before the 2 deaths.
My dad was a plastic surgeon who worked on cleft lip and palate surgeries. He was operating on someone on this Sunday, and the next day he found out that the anesthesiologist he was with tested positive for COVID. So for that week, Dad just kind of isolated himself, but was kind of in denial. He was like, it's fine, I'm fine. Progressively over the week, my dad was getting worse. Things like on Saturday morning, he told my mom, let's go to the hospital and get tests. She's like, once Dad's chest x-ray results came out, the doctor was like, we need to check on Ashraf. Ashraf's my dad's name. His lungs are really bad. And he was like, I want him admitted today. On Sunday, things started getting quite bad. Dad's oxygen levels dropped to critical levels. I had a deadline for coursework on the Sunday. So I was in my own little world. I was like, oh, Dad will be fine. It's okay. Like, I was like, he is healthy. Dad has never been sick. He's never, like, it's fine. If Mom's okay, everything's okay. So I was in my own little Cambridge bubble, which looking back is really upsetting. Mom called me and she told me Dad had been put on a ventilator. And she was like, I don't know what's happening. this is quite bad, but he's been sedated and he's been put on a ventilator. So yeah, I called my best friend. I was like, please come down. I need someone. We were all having dinner. And then I received a message at around 10:40 from the wife of the son of a friend of my dad's from Nairobi, being like, I'm really sorry for your loss. I was like, excuse me, what? What are you talking about? She was like, it was posted on the group chat of Egyptians in Kenya that your dad passed away. I was like, I've not been informed of this. So I tried to call my mom, and at the time difference with Kenya was 3 hours. Yeah, 3 hours. I tried to call mom, and mom's phone was off because she had gone to bed. And I tried calling mom again, and this time she picked up. She woke up and saw like a million missed calls from me. So I was like, Mom, is that okay? She was like, yeah, he's just on the ventilator. Just pray for him. He'll be fine. I was like, Mom, no, I've been told he's died. Mom was alone the whole night, just crying. And she didn't wake up my baby brother. And she says that was the worst night of her life. I think my biggest lesson from the year has been, I think a lot of us had this false sense of security that life is guaranteed in a way. There was just like a lot of I knows, and then I realized actually there's no I knows. No one knows anything.
We must therefore go into a national lockdown which is tough enough to contain this variant. That means the government is once again instructing you to stay at home.
We just weren't in focus. We weren't the group that was important throughout the pandemic, especially sort of looking at the government measures that for the most part didn't include university students at all. Is quite frustrating.
I remember at specific points, postgraduates very much feeling like an afterthought.
I think there's been a lot of passing the buck between government and universities as to what the guidance was going to be, and while a lot of the rest of the population has had their roadmaps, I think universities have just been doing it extremely last minute.
Young people are in danger of giving up on their futures and on themselves, with a quarter saying they feel unable to cope with life, one of the UK's leading charities has said.
And I kept on saying to my mum, it doesn't really feel like I'm at university. And so my work felt very meaningless. And at times I found it harder to cope emotionally. What made Michaelmas a bit better was that I knew when I finished my work at 6, that's when I stopped work every day, I would walk out of my room and 10 feet later there would be a group of people ready to go down to dinner. I would say to people, there's something it's not the same seeing someone on Zoom, because as soon as you close the laptop, you're suddenly very aware of how alone you are. And I did struggle a lot more in Lent with not feeling a sense of injustice, that, you know, you're told all these things about university, you know, like work hard now in sixth form and university will be worth it. Work hard now, university will be easier. It'll be more fun. You'll find yourself. It will be the best 3 years of your life. I have been good for so long. I have worked hard. I've listened to my teachers. I've been the goody two-shoes. When is it my time to be happy? But you don't suddenly go, oh, you're 18, you know, or 20 or 19 or 20 in university, and you're suddenly not still very young and quite emotionally vulnerable in the same way. Why do you stop caring about us when we're 18? I only got diagnosed in early January and I had dyspraxia, and I did reach out for help. I contacted the DRC. And they said we could get you specialist mentoring, specialist study skills. I filled in the form saying, yes, I'd like that. And I still haven't heard back from them. I also reached out for counselling, and I didn't get any response until I was on their phone sobbing, saying, I don't want to I don't want to stay at university. Someone who needs help can't wait 5 weeks. They need it in a week. They need it sooner than they send it, because they only send it when they really, really can't do it anymore.
My mental health has deteriorated a lot, so quite drastically. I basically feel like a loser. I just felt like I never reached that point where I am a good scientist, where I can do science on my own, where I can contribute to my field. Being in Cambridge adds like an additional layer of stress because people expect more from you. Supervisors expect more from you, and then not being able to deliver, I still feel like a failure, and I feel like I have let people down.
There's no one reason why I'm intermitting, and probably not going to come back to Cambridge, if I'm entirely honest. But not feeling supported is a big one. Cambridge hasn't been good enough.
As a whole, I am incredibly disillusioned with the university. There has just been such a lack of thought for how crushing the last year has been in so many ways.
It is an issue of access. Cambridge is exclusive in a lot of ways and elitist in a lot of ways, and one of them is for people who have certain mental vulnerabilities. You know, they aren't equipped to help people like that, and that people like that are not on high on their priority list, and I think it is an issue of access.
Update from the Magdalen College Master in the COVID open meeting. I don't believe students are capable of judging the severity of their own mental health. Why does lockdown make it easy to think that all your friends hate you? Anyone else got a shit tutor? Mine left me on red on Teams when I told them I was having a mental health crisis. Second year student here. I managed to muddle my way through the first lockdown term, Easter, while dealing with severe depression and anxiety and doing virtual USC and NHS counselling. I'm now at the point where I feel almost unable to do another online term. But when I try and speak about it, I feel so pathetic and like I should be able to handle it as everyone else is going through this currently, especially as there's over 2 million university students in the UK. My parents also point this out when I try to speak to them about my mental health issues and imply that I'm being lazy, which also isn't great. Right now, all I want to do is intimate, but seeing as we aren't even allowed to do that anymore, I just really want to drop out. But then I feel like an even bigger failure. I don't know what to do. I've been barely eating or sleeping from the stress of all of this, and I really don't want to get as low as I was during the first lockdown.
Are you worried about students?
A simple one-word answer, I think, yes. Fundamentally, the sheer increase in mental health posts and struggles that everyone's having.
It's interesting that we talk about the quantitative side of it, statistics, and I know, that university is the STEP initiative has been focusing on the numbers. But I think as a platform for voices and sharing experiences, we ought to take account the qualitative side of it. That is the depth of suffering and the variety of suffering. And I think based on these things alone, I would tell you that, yes, there is a problem and that cannot be denied.
Some people might say that the pandemic has been tough for everyone. What's distinctive about student suffering in the pandemic?
Colleges in general have been very, very bad at helping students through this. They are just trying to carry on as though nothing happened, sort of making no reasonable accommodations. And I think that extends to the university on the whole. People are very unhappy sort of how there's been a clinging on to how things functioned in a non-COVID world.
And particularly when people come across blatant inconsistencies between colleges and departments when they think they've been unfairly impacted.
Universities, it's touted as like the best years of your life and all that, and especially for freshers coming here and just not having any of that. And then also the fact that university is the time when you're supposed to be independent or learning how to be independent, but at the same time everyone's just kind of been sent home and you have to live like an adult at home, somehow manage your university life with your family life as well, where you're kind of in between childhood and adulthood. So kind of have to go back to your childhood home. It's just very strange.
Student concerns, and that's a national thing, have been sent to the bottom. I think we got some submissions recently saying the students are not even mentioned in the Prime Minister's discussion.
Vice-Chancellor Stephen Toop has announced in an email this afternoon that the university intends to welcome back as many students as possible for Easter term.
In medicine, you have to learn anatomy and you have to know the relations of different regions to other regions. You can't really appreciate that with a textbook or by watching something online. You can only really do that in person and with your hands. So you can't really replicate that, to be honest. So medicine, it's not just a theoretical subject. It's very hands-on. And as I go in future years, it's going to be even more clinical. So I guess not having that practical aspect was something that I missed. But in terms of the faculty of biology, they're the people who run the medicine for the first 2 years. I do feel that they were a little bit, they weren't really communicating that well with students. We don't know what's going on with our exams. We don't actually know the dates of our exams as well. So there's been a lack of communication, and I wish they just emailed us a bit more, telling us what's going on, because I have no idea what's happening with our exams.
There is no mitigation for such things. The department just shrugs it off, saying that, well, tough life, that's the reality now. While last year they've been far more understanding of student experiences. This year they're just like, well, just adapt. That's what we are teaching you here. The department was simply not ready to handle remote assessment. They just weren't prepared. In January, we found out that we're going to write an exam, which is going to be an open book exam. Everyone was like, okay, that's different. And the compromise was that it will be open book, but hence the exam will be a little bit harder. We are like, okay, my lecturer for one of the subjects said that, oh yeah, it's going to be open book, we're sure of it.
Screw the engineering department for promising open book, light touch invigilation exams and changing to software proctoring and closed book exams after a month of people preparing for the former. The engineering department are such incredible pricks, changing Part 2 exams to be closed book only 2 months before they happen after previously informing us they'd be open book.
Then, 2 months afterwards, like March, 1 month ahead of the assessment, they said, oh yeah, it's gonna be closed book exam. But the exam papers were already approved. So we are getting harder exams, which were prepared for an open book formula, but in the end it was closed book and fully invigilated by a software called Proctor exam. The whole academic rigor and the whole bell curve that they treat as if it's some sort of a god completely blinded them to human tragedy happening right in the student body. You don't say to a person whose dad died during Michaelmas term that it's, you just need to be bell curved and, then you can file for some mitigation. If you're a great boundary, you go through. No, you don't say that to a person like this. And you don't say it to a whole 300 or so people who all went through their own tragedies. How can you say that it's fair to assess me by comparing me to people who have their own study room, who are financially safe, don't have to pick up second jobs during the pandemic? How can you say that? That it's fair to compare me to, instead of assessing my performance on its own, taking everything into consideration? This is not fair. And the department was just being cruel for the sake of upholding some concept of academic rigor. And of course, here comes the big one, which is tuition fees reduction. We did not receive equivalent academic experience this year.
With the rent strike, then some petitions about, reducing the tuition fee. And I feel like that's one thing that's not being addressed. One of the many things that has not been addressed, not just as a university, but also just the government hasn't particularly addressed this issue the way it should be. University students have not gotten the same education we would get on a normal year. So I think it was just not fair for students to be expected to pay the same.
Despite what they can tell us, that They adapted well to the pandemic world where we have to do things remotely. No, they didn't. The videos are not the same. Lack of labs is not the same. When asked with a question about the course, one of the lecturers said, Google it. I didn't pay £9,000 to Google it.
I was speaking to some girls from my college, but also some people from other colleges, and they did share the same experiences. So I think there was a wide range of people who were presenting the different issues that were all related to the provision of education that was supplied to us this year. So I think the tuition fees was kind of a concern, not just with myself, but with many people.
Let's be honest, the university in the UK is commercialized. I'm a customer and I demand things for the price. Yet no one will address the fact that this contract was broken. So I think universities should actually have a debate with students instead of ignoring us.
There was this incredibly great sense of frustration of, we're not numbers, we're not statistics, we're not fresh almost workers about to be thrown into a system. We're people, we're individuals, and we want to be treated as such, and we don't want to be punished.
I feel like there's been a generational holdup. It's the old people that have been that have access to property, that had a job back in the day. There was not such a strong privatization, so they had access to free education, and now they're retired, they have access to good pension, and they're the ones getting vaccinated. It's just at some point maybe we can sort of try and rebalance, and I feel like COVID has just confirmed that our society is not very much wired around the youth.
I completely think that we've been dismissed. I think that in many regards, it's not even dismissal, it's just outright neglect. The fact that you're going to be able to have 10,000 people in a stadium, but students still don't know when they're supposed to be going back to uni. I'm quite surprised actually that we haven't taken to protesting.
I think so many people don't realise how many people in their life are struggling with a mental health issue, and I think that's where so much of the stigma comes from. And with that in mind, now everyone knows somebody who's gone through this really big traumatic event, and it's about thinking about how we take care of each other, but also understanding that not everyone adapts and responds in the same way. And so I think with that, as a subsection of that kind of whole thinking about mental health stigma, I think that will change things. But I'm also very conscious of the fact that so many people kind of have this bootstrap idea, nothing happened because it happened to everyone. Nothing happened. So surely you just need to move on.
That's partly, I think, why we're motivated to make this film. There's this sense that we have been let down consistently. People of our age, I'm 21. We kind of came to consciousness with 2008 and the financial crash. Then we had all the shit show of the 2010s. We had Brexit, then Trump, and all the awful things that happened. And now we've had the pandemic. So I think there's really a sense that we have a right to be heard at this point.
if you're struggling, you're in the majority, not in the minority, and we should be actively kind to ourselves in this really tough time.